Hey everyone, welcome back. So we're going to look at audio export and then sort of take a small diversion to how to prepare your session specifically for drums, but these things will apply to pretty much any key group instrument. It just depends on your workflow. So a lot of this really does depend on how you want to work. So some of these suggestions may or may not be something that will work for you, but this is kind of how I think of these features. So I got a simple sequence. Okay, so there's a lot of juicy effects, and there's only really actually like 6 or 7 tracks on here, not that much. And then of course I've got the drums coming from key. Well, all these are coming from key groups. So the drum samples were all performed on one track. In other words, there's no separate track for snares and kicks for now. Okay, and we'll address that in a minute. So let's just go and look at what our audio options actually are. And I'm going to go into menu, save, and audio mixdown. Now, I'm not going to cover stereo output. That's pretty self-explanatory. But the reason why I'm in here is because, see that little checkbox up here where it says main inserts? Well, this is going to be actually, irregardless what mode you're going to export out. This is actually where you select whether you want your effects to export within your audio stems or audio bounce, or you do not. Now, I like to do a bounce of wet and then, of course, a bounce of dry. So I have 2 different bounces. So, but it's your preference because you're taking these stems out in an example to Studio One or Logic. Okay, and from there you can kind of tweak them from there. But even so, I still want to have that reference of audio with the effects because I might end up keeping the effects on some of these tracks. Okay, so now notice when I go to separate programs or explode tracks, we're talking audio now, that option now is taken away from me. So keep in mind when you're selecting that, you can't escape from having to go up here just to select that option. So if I deselect this and go down here, that does disappear. But keep in mind, when I export these programs or tracks, there's not going to be any effects on it. Okay? Or if I have this clicked. So it's important to understand that you kind of have to make that extra step to turn that selection on or off. So if I were to go into here, now one important thing is when you're exporting stems, so let me make sure I've got nothing in my export folder. Okay, so let me just put this right here. Okay, so when you export, when you do a separate program export, just keep in mind what that's basically doing is the MPC is extracting any audio, regardless whether it's assigned to a track or not. It's going to export a stereo stem from whatever program. Not talking about tracks now, program. So if I have 5 instruments loaded into a session, but I only have 1 instrument active, it's going to create those 5 stems, which will be a bunch of silence, of course, and then that one program that's actually, let's say, assigned to a MIDI track, it's going to actually export that audio as well. Okay, so that's sort of the primary difference. Now, if I go into explode tracks, what that's going to do, it's only going to create an audio stem from tracks that actually have data on it, and of course an instrument. Now the instrument, like I said, these tracks don't have to be like on the motif, for example, you have a 1-to-1 relationship between track and source. That's kind of a bad example, but here you can actually have one drum kit, but then, for example, have 7 MIDI tracks that will have, let's say, the kick on one track, the snare on the other. So you kind of know what I mean. And so what will happen is it will just separate those audio feeds from the original source, but then you'll have them all separate tracks. Okay, so how do you actually do that? So the easiest way to separate your drums is called explode, and we're talking about in terms of MIDI at the track level. So if I hit the pencil icon right here, you're going to see explode. By hitting that, by pressing that button, it's going to take whatever samples that you have that you've used on that track, and it's going to create a separate MIDI track for that instrument or that performance. So before I hit explode, it's also important to know that exploding, when you initiate that function, as far as organizing your session, the explode track is going to explode it on the first available unused track. So if I hit the main menu, you see how track 17 is drums and then everything else is unused? So in this example, it's going to go and explode the first kit piece on track 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever. So from an organizational standpoint, here's my first 16 tracks. Notice I have, now I don't have that many tracks going, but notice how I have all these named, the first 16. The reason why I did that is because you want to keep because you might want to keep organized, and you want to keep those first 16 slots. For those first 16 slots occupied for potential tracks for like audio, or for key group instruments, and then you want to keep perhaps all your drums on a separate section within your sequence. Okay, so I do that for organizational purposes. So check this out. Explode, and look, it muted the original track, which is fine. And then look, every single drum piece gets its own track. Okay, now if I hit explode, it's going to create an audio track for each track that's got information on it. Check this out. So I'm going to click this here. Let me just go into exports. So it's going to create quite a few tracks, actually, because everything's going to be separate. Now, ultimately, this is the most automated and hassle-free. Now, the second way I'm going to show you is almost like a manual way to explode your tracks, but to the way you want them. Okay, so it's a little bit more work, but you can save it as a template. So it's not as much. It's not going to be as intensive as how I'm going to show you, because it's sort of setting it up for the first time. So let's just take a look at these tracks. Should be one more audio track, and that's it. Okay. So here's just sort of the basic. So we go into here, and so you can see the keys. Now here's the stereo track. Now as you go through the these are the tracks that were exploded with the MIDI. Notice notice I have just the rim shot on a separate track. And then I have these. So I got one hi-hat, but then I got another track with the shoulder on it, because these are separated by track and sample. So what if you wanted to regroup these? Okay, so let's just say you like to work a certain way, and exploding tracks may not be to your preference because of that. So let me just go quickly. I've got this little canned template for this, which is right here. We're going to start from scratch. So we're going to take the same example now, and we're going to create, hopefully, a situation. Hold on a second here. Let's make sure this is the right thing to do here. You know what I did? Because this MPC keys has a dedicated save button, I accidentally pressed save, and it saved something I didn't want it to save. So quick tip number 1, the clear at the track level. You can actually clear this, so I'm going to reverse this. Okay. Hit the pencil icon, and it's going to clear the track assignment and clear any MIDI data on it. And so this is actually good to know this anyway. Because when I was reaching over here behind the camera, I didn't see that I mispressed the save button. That's a blessing and a curse, by the way. That new save button that's on the MPC keys is good and it's not good. Because you can accidentally press it and save something you didn't want to do. So I kind of don't like that, by the way. So I'll just erase this. And I think this is the last one. It's not the last one, actually, because there's one right here at 18. Okay, so, all right, so let's just do what I call like a selective explode. So what I'm going to do, and you can create a template, but let's just do this. KD for kick drum. I'm just going to go in sort of like an order. So SN for snares. And then HI for hi-hats. TM for toms. And CY for cymbals. We'll just kind of do it like that. So, all right. So what I'm going to do is almost like a manual explode. So if I hit the marker button at the very top pane, I'm going to look at the events button. And all I'm going to do is, all I have to do is to say I want all my kicks right here. Let's see. So before I do this, let me take the mute off so you can hear what I'm doing. So let's go back. And all I'm going to do is just specify the kick drum. And I'm just going to merge everything over that, just a kick drum. I'll take all my snare family of samples and merge it to snare. Take my hi-hat samples, articulations, and we're just going to merge that all to one MIDI track, which is here. And then toms. And then last but not least, your crashes. So I'm just going to do crashes and rides at the same time. And that's going to be denoted by CY. Like I said, you can make a template so you don't have to do this again. And now what's going to happen, let me mute so this is going to be this will function, this drums track will still function as like the main track. So if I'm going to make any alterations or changes, all I'm going to do is do it to the main, like the master performance, and then I'll just repeat whatever I did to update whatever track that was affected by it. So now watch. If I go and save this, And let's just make sure that I got nothing in here. Oops. And we're going to do this as explode tracks. Let's just make sure this is going to go. We're going to call this D for David. And I want to make sure that this goes into the right folder. So when you're exploding the tracks, you can also do that wet and dry. So when you're in the process of exploding any track, you could do one pass wet, one pass dry. And so you could use D for dry and W for wet, so that you can make the distinction of what stems have the effects on them and what doesn't. So let's go into here, and we'll just go into places, documents, export, and here they are. That's the stereo track. So now I got all my snare articulations on the same audio track. All my hi-hats. And this is going to be my toms probably. So there's only toms in the very end of this little track. So, but that's pretty much how you can do like a customized explode. All right. So hopefully you can take this basic information. There's other areas I'm not going to cover today that requires track duplication. And most of these things are efforts so that you can extend your pre-production levels before you even further before you export your tracks as audio. But this pretty much is a good way to get started. So until next time, peace out.